Hello everyone, my name is Esther Lessing. It's so lovely to speak to a room full of South Africans. I am originally from South Africa, which you can potentially tell. I grew up in Mpangeni in KwaZulu-Natal. However, today I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. So today I'm here to talk to you about how you can discover business analysis and how that will help you deliver your business intelligence initiatives. So there's a lot of ground to cover. I have divided this presentation into 3 sections, which I will take you through in a moment. But very excited to share this with you, and let's kick this off. The topic for today is to discover how business analysis helps deliver business intelligence successfully. So there are 3 different sections to this presentation, like I mentioned before. The first one is to just discuss business analysis as a profession and as a skill set with you so that you are clear around what business analysis actually is. Then we will look at how business analysis can play a role in helping you deliver your business intelligence projects. And then finally, I'll give you 3 steps that you can take tomorrow when you go back to your office in terms of a health check of business analysis within your team. So I found this quote and I thought, business intelligence is such an exciting area. And this quote just really summed it up for me. It says, information is the oil of the 21st century and analytics is the combustion engine, by Peter Zondergaard. So I hope you can relate, but that is where my excitement for this area comes from. I think analytics is now really going to start helping us make amazing decisions from a business, but also from a public service perspective. It just opens up the world of decision-making quite dramatically. However, there are some challenges that we face to get from where we are today to this really ideal and amazing capability that business intelligence can provide organizations. And one of, or rather 3 of the common problems, and not by all means, it's not all the challenges, but the ones that are very relevant to what we're talking about today is the disparate data sources and data that exists within organizations in the current state. There are also communication gaps that exist between different teams. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. And then, of course, we tend to sometimes, if some of these processes that we'll talk about today is not in place, we can end up solving the wrong problems or not quite all the relevant problems to put us in that position we want to be to make better decisions. Now, I like to think of business analysis as being that secret ingredient that you inject into your project to give you clarity on how to get from your current state to your future state. It also helps to facilitate effective communication between different teams. And it definitely helps you to make sure that you are solving the right problems and all the problems that's part of scope. So business analysis is a really powerful bit of arsenal that you can put into your project to make sure that you achieve those goals. But what is business analysis? Now, this is quite an interesting question for me personally. And let me share with you that many years ago, I'm sad to say, it's approximately 20 years ago, that I started my career as a business analyst with Arthur Andersen. And, I got interviewed by Arthur Andersen, and that was when they were based just down the road from where you are in Sandton. Not Sandton, in Hyde Park. And I got interviewed by the IT manager at the time. I applied for a role, somebody referred the role to me, and the role title said business analyst. Now, I did finish my degree, so I was just quite new to the whole world of work. And I had a rough idea of the type of work that I'll be doing But you know what it's like when you've just finished university. You're not really that clear. But the interesting thing is, so they employed me as a business analyst, but I, in hindsight, don't think they even fully understood what the role of the business analyst was. Where did it start and where did it finish? What I did get out of that role was I learned a lot about a lot of different systems, and I got involved in projects, initially small, but eventually I got transferred to London, where I worked on really big international projects as a business analyst. And as the years went by, things started to crystallize and mature, and even the profession itself matured along the way. So I've come a really long way. Like I say, it's been probably about 20 years now. And since then, I have trained more than 2,000 people worldwide on how to get professional certification as a business analyst. I've also delivered approximately 100 projects during this time, or at least been part of delivering 100 different technology projects. So I really understand what business analysis means today. However, I would really like to take you through the same journey in a few minutes and really crystallize it for you as well. Because you probably still wonder, so what exactly is business analysis? Is it the same as data analytics? Is it the same as business analytics? Is it the same as business intelligence analysis? There are so many different terms out there, and I often have to clarify, depending on the conversation I'm having, that there are, although there's a lot of linkages between these roles and these different domains, there are also some distinct differences. So I would like to take you through that now. Now, if you were to stop someone in the street that is a business analyst and ask them, so what do you do for a living, and can you explain to me what that means? They will probably say something like, I tend to bridge the gap between the business and IT when it comes to delivering technology solutions. And what I also try and do is I try and make sure that the business need is conveyed in an effective and correct way to those delivery teams. So in a nutshell, yes, that is what a business analyst essentially does. The overarching function of a business analyst is to look at that gap, what I refer to here as between the business and IT, but let's be realistic, it's not always the business and IT. It could be the business and a vendor, or it could be IT and a vendor, or it could simply be different project delivery teams that has to work together. But ultimately, there is a gap. And sometimes the gap is really wide, and there is a lot of challenge to get that bridge built. But sometimes it's just a healthy gap where we just question each other enough to still produce good results. However, let's just unpack the gap for a moment. So if there is a gap between these different teams, let's, for argument's sake, talk about the business and IT. This causes fragile relationships between these teams. And when there's fragile relationships, you probably know that the teams might start working in silos. So a business team might feel like they need to go and implement solutions independent of the technology teams. And in the process, they end up duplicating data. So I know that historically, sometimes this would happen where different teams would build their own solutions for particular problems within their groups. This may not always align with the business strategy, and certainly will not align with the technology strategies that's in place. So that causes lots of data issues, and that creates one of the big challenges in the business intelligence world, where we now have to rationalize that data and really kind of identify the duplications, the inconsistencies, quality issues, privacy issues, security issues. There are all these different factors that we need to consider. So that creates a big challenge for us in the current state of business intelligence. Now, and ultimately, the big problem that silos create and all of this duplication creates is quite a big increase in costs. So how do we solve for this? Now, like I say, I mean, we need to identify the gap, the things that makes up the gap. And I think we had a good conversation about that now. But I also just want to highlight here that the lack of communication causes miscommunication, misunderstandings, and this is also due to things like these different levels of communication happening on projects. You may be exposed to having business leaders as part of your project talking to technical people that talks at a very different level of detail. And also just the language factor. A business person may use terminology that's not familiar with a technologist and vice versa. And then, of course, we may think we are receiving a certain solution, but sometimes there's mismatched expectations. And yes, there are some really good methodologies like the different agile interpretations that helps us with mismatched communications and expectations. But business analysis underpins a lot of this. And I'll take you on a journey to see how these two things work together. So at a very high level, yes, the business analyst helps to facilitate those communication challenges between the different groups. They play a very important role in terms of translator and interpreter, because if you're talking about filling a particular need, there is quite a lot of different things that needs to be interpreted and translated in order for the delivery teams to be able to consume that information. And finally, a big job of the business analyst and business analysis as a profession within or a skill set within your team is to help manage the expectations of all the different stakeholders that's involved. But wait, there is more. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart, as they say, looks a bit detailed, but it is quite important for me to show this to you and to give you a sense of where business analysis actually sits and exactly what it consists of and what is it that it will bring to your BI solution or your BI initiative, I should say. So let's just have a quick look at this diagram to break it up for you. You'll see that in the top area here, I have spoken about the change. So this is really just talking about any initiative that might be happening, whether it's technology or business initiatives. There is some kind of change happening within the organization. And every type of change will typically fall within having a need that needs to be understood. There will be some kind of solution that gets defined. And then we expect to see some value, either from the solution we've just implemented, but there's also a lot of activity that happens when we assess any existing solutions for value to see whether we need to make a change. So these are the kind of three big, I don't want to call it phases because it's not really phases, but it's the big areas that we tend to do our change initiatives within. Now, business analysis has been defined by the International Business Analysis Institute, and they've done a big job or a good job of it. But what they've done to break down a very vast and very diverse skill set is they've broken it down into 6 knowledge areas. So you'll see the colored areas on this chart. Very briefly, we've got business analysis, planning and monitoring, strategy analysis, requirements analysis and design definition, solution evaluation, requirements lifecycle management, and at the bottom here, the blue one, elicitation and collaboration. Now, I've tried to indicate with color here roughly where does the knowledge area get applied across the change spectrum. So like, for example, the very first one, business analysis, planning and monitoring, that knowledge area is relevant across the entire change. And then strategy analysis as an alternative example here primarily gets used when we are defining the need, but it does bleed into when we start talking about the solution as well. And then requirements analysis and design definition sits more specifically around the solution area, because this is where we start talking about the details of the solution and so forth. And we will come back to this diagram as we work through a practical example, just to let it make a bit more sense to you. So 2 last points on this diagram that I don't want to miss out on saying. The first one is these different knowledge areas that you see, these 6 colored areas, they don't have a particular sequence in what they are expected to be performed. So it's not like you first do strategy analysis and then you do requirements analysis and design definition. It doesn't work like that with business analysis. Although in some cases there will be some sequential logic where certain things has to happen before you can do the next thing, it is not the intention to try and find a sequence of you've got step 1 to 10 and you have to execute those in sequence. Business analysis is a very fluid kind of skill set where every project, as you can imagine, will be different, and every project therefore would need different solutions and techniques and aspects to be included. And now the last point on this slide is the very top bar where we're talking about context. Now, everything that you see here on this diagram describes core business analysis skill sets and skills and tasks and everything that needs to be done regardless of the type of initiative or change that you're working on. However, there are certain, what we refer to here as different contexts that these skill sets are applied. And the first context here identified is Agile Perspective. So in an Agile project, you would apply business analysis throughout, but you fall within the framework or the methodology of Agile. So that has an interpretation. Then we've got the next one, which is the relevant one for us, is Business Intelligence Perspective. So here we talk more around data and getting to our end goal within business intelligence, dashboards and capability. Then there are 3 others, which is information technology, business architecture, and business process. So these are just lenses that you can basically cast over the profession of business analysis. Right, so now let's just have a quick look at what does each of these areas give you before we jump into a practical example. So the business analysis, planning and monitoring, the top blue one, this one is all about organizing and planning business analysis for your project. So there are very discrete tasks that you need to do that involves doing the organization and the planning of the approach. Then strategy analysis. This is where we really start to understand what is the problem that we're solving, and we start creating a vision for the future. Requirements analysis and design definition. Now we start delving into the details. So we really start to model requirements, we validate and confirm. This is really where a lot of the rubber hits the road. Then solution evaluation that I alluded to before. This is all about how well is your systems performing at the moment. So we're looking at that, how well is the enterprise performing in relation to that, and assessing what business value are we receiving, either from new solutions that we track or from existing solutions that we need to track and see if there's any value or if there's any ways that we can optimize business value. Then we've got the purple here, requirements lifecycle management. Now, requirements lifecycle management in the days before Agile was a lot more sequential and kind of starting at making sure that you've got all the requirements, you prioritize and you approved. However, now you still need to prioritize requirements, and you do that via Agile Backlog, for example, and things still need to be approved by doing all the different rituals in the Agile environment. So the nature has changed slightly, but it's still very much used and very important as part of your business analysis management. And then one of the most important knowledge areas that we really need to manage and do correctly is the elicitation and the collaboration aspects. This is where you build relationships with all your stakeholders. This is where all the communication happens, where you really collaborate with all the different stakeholders and teams to come out with what it is that we need to change. Okay, now that was a mouthful. Let's now change gears for a moment. And here I'm just focusing and showing you that we're looking at the business intelligence perspective. But let's now talk about an actual practical example. Now, I found this example on the Tableau website, and I found it to be a fantastic example to demonstrate a project that actually makes a real-world difference that we can feel good about. So let me tell you about this case study. So the Des Moines Public Schools, there's 60 schools that makes up this company or this school business, and they are based in Iowa in the US. They've got over 31,000 students enrolled this year. Now, the Des Moines Public Schools, they had a situation where they felt that there's a lot more that the school could do to help some of the at-risk students by trying to identify when students were at risk and then to try and intervene to help change the direction that student might be heading down. Now, what was lumbering them or keeping them from being able to do that was that they had all of their reporting done with Excel spreadsheets. So they would have, if you imagine you've got 60 schools and 31,000 students, all of the data relating to student records, student attendance, and any other kind of academic background, students' academic records, all of this was managed through systems that ultimately had to be produced in terms of Excel reports. Now, if all the schools had to send all of the Excel reports or the Excel inputs into those reports to a particular administration function, they discovered that this process is not only cumbersome, but it was also really quite slow, which means data was sometimes incorrect. You would have the usual problems. So what they did is they went to Tableau and they said, look, we need to be able to try and do this solution. Tableau was the solution they chose to go with. But what they did is they implemented a business intelligence solution where they were able to start to do some predictive analysis based on student attendance data. And they were able to identify potential students that might be at risk, and they could proactively start to do some intervention. So this is, in a very short nutshell, the scope of what they did here from a business intelligence solution perspective. So just to confirm, so what they were doing, they were identifying the at-risk students. That's what they wanted to be able to do. And they decided to include or focus on student attendance. So that was the scope of the piece of work. Now what I would like to do, now that you understand a bit of the background and the problem they were trying to solve, their key goal and the scope of what they wanted to include in this BI solution, I just want to show you where in the business analysis landscape would business analysis have been applied. So to start with, the business analysis aspect of this initiative would have done stakeholder analysis because they would have had to identify who are all the different stakeholders. Clearly, the students were one particular stakeholder group, but then your student administration staff in the different schools would have been a different stakeholder group. And they would have had to determine who are higher impact or who are impacted by the solution and who has influence over the solution. A RACI, which you might be familiar with, all about roles and responsibilities. They would potentially have included concept modeling, and they would potentially also have done some scope modeling as part of their activities to try and work out exactly how big is this piece of work and what are we looking at. So this is just to give you a bit of a flavor as to what the business analysis activities would have been, but also where it could potentially have sat within the business analysis landscape. And then, of course, one of the key activities that would have been part of this is they would have kicked off some elicitation and collaboration with the student administration staff, where they would have worked with them to really understand what is the business problem, what are the different issues, what are they trying to achieve. And this would have been done through one-on-one interviews, or potentially workshop facilitation, or simply doing some research based on information that was already in place or available. So from a business analysis perspective, this is where the project would have started. Now I just want to ask you a question. Have you ever had to remodel a house or renovate a house? Or what I have never done that, but what I've done is I've watched those programs where they do renovations, and it can be quite entertaining, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've got the same types of programs in South Africa, yes, where you could just see all the different crazy things that they do to renovate. But ultimately, the point here is when you do buy, if you imagine buying a house that you want to renovate, you would do certain things to understand what the condition of that house is. So you would do a pest inspection. You might discover that the roof is leaking. You might discover there's mold. So you will do a bit of an analysis of your own to determine exactly what is the state of the house. And this is the same within this project world or within a business intelligence solution. You would start by really understanding the data landscape. You'll start that by developing a source logical data model so that you know exactly where does all the different data types come from. What does it mean? You'll understand the data by doing a data dictionary potentially, or referring to existing one. And of course, you will also do a quality assessment. So it's all about understanding what is that data landscape now. If we go back to the business analysis aspects of this, you are now going to start applying some strategy analysis by analyzing the current state. As you can see, this is a key task of strategy analysis. And the types of techniques that you might be applying here would be data modeling. You'll create data flow diagrams, or potentially be able to refer to existing data flow diagrams. Sometimes they do exist, sometimes they don't. So you may have to create your own, but you'll do not necessarily all of these particular techniques, but these are just examples of the types of techniques that you could use within a BI project to help you understand the current state. So decision analysis techniques, and you could also do root cause analysis. All of this is all about understanding where we are today. Now, here I'm also showing you that requirements analysis and design definition knowledge area has some tasks specifically looking at specifying and modeling requirements. So there would be certain current state requirements that needs to exist and stay the same that you'll start to model as well. And then you'll go through some steps to verify and validate requirements. So this area of analysis and design definition becomes quite an important area of skills and capability within your team to help you understand what is the current state. Now, just to then go back down here to our important elicitation and collaboration knowledge area, this is where you will continuously be doing one-on-ones with your stakeholders, you'll run workshops, and you'll continue to do research on any existing documentation that might already exist, or you might be able to analyze systems and data on your own to really understand what is happening with a lot of the existing data sets, as well as, of course, looking at the existing reports. So in our example with the Des Moines schools, the analysis aspect here would have spent a lot of time to understand those current reports. So looking at all those Excel spreadsheets, understanding where does the data come from to make up those Excel spreadsheet reports. There would be a lot of work that would have gone into that. And my guess is they may not have had existing data flow diagrams to look at, but perhaps they did. I mean, I wasn't there, it's just an example, but it makes sense that the analyst would really have to delve through and understand exactly what each of those reports are doing and what decisions are those reports supporting at the moment. Okay, so that's the current state analysis. Now, just for the record, in other types of projects that's not business intelligence, you might have other techniques like process modeling and process flows, use case diagrams, and so forth to help you understand the current state. Now, as you can see, we managed to renovate our house. We were able to build this beautiful house with a rainbow. So this is all about now defining what do we want the future state to be. So it's all about where are we going. Now here we look at the target logical data model. So we've understood the current state and we know exactly where we are. And now we start designing, okay, what do we want the target data model to look like? And also what additional data we may need or want to be part of this model. We'll also delve into transformational rules. So here it's about really understanding how do we transform current data into future data to be able to give us the results on the dashboards and in the reports. More work that would happen here is we'll look at the dashboards, the reports, the queries, and we'll identify what new decisions Des Moines schools, for example, want to be able to make. So here it would be something where they want to be able to predict potentially at-risk students. That would be one of their requirements. With the dashboards, they might want to have dashboards in a certain way with certain privileges for certain types of people. So there's a lot of work that goes into, from an analysis perspective, defining the future state. Now, if we look back at our diagram that's getting busier and busier every time, I just want to point out that here we're specifically still working around strategy analysis. Now we're looking at the future, and we are still delving into the details of modeling that future state. And some of the techniques that we might be using, again, we'll use the data modeling techniques to get us the data target model. We will do some in-depth decision analysis to understand how certain decisions are made, and we'll document those. Prototyping, potentially some of the visualization of data will be prototyped and shared with the student administration staff, who could give us some feedback in terms of what they want to look like. And then, of course, we'll be able to use personas or user stories or even use case diagrams, wireframes, very likely for the reports. So it's all about now defining the future state using these different techniques. Now, again, still using collaboration. We're still working with these people, and the teams would still be running workshops for the future state. But something here that I just want to highlight, which we haven't talked about yet, is the requirement lifecycle management aspect. When we get to the point where we are doing quite a lot of requirements analysis, we're doing a lot of requirements definition, whether it's in the format of user stories or not, here it's about remembering that we need to be able to trace our decisions. We need to be able to trace our requirements throughout the entire life cycle. So there are some different techniques you can use these days. If you plan it properly and you do your your initial planning of how you will apply tools such as Jira to help you manage your requirements. If you do that really well, Jira can do a lot of the tracing for you. But you still need to think about it, and you still need to plan it for it to work effectively. And then, of course, prioritization and change requests. So you need to think about the prioritization activities and make sure that that's done and executed correctly. Okay, so we're doing very well. Now, the final step of a business intelligence initiative from a business analyst perspective is that we do want to create a solution architecture. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about a technical solution architecture. I'm purely talking about showing how the data flows from the source systems, how it gets transformed, and then displayed in the target systems. This is typically done with data flow models. So that's enough said about that one. Now, one very last point I just want to highlight to you. Whilst we've talked about a lot of the technical capabilities that business analysis applies within a BI solution to help you get to delivering your solution, there's a lot of underlying competencies that business analysts and other team members that do business analysis tend to have to work on. And these are skills that we develop over a long period of time, and they get better and better with time. And this is analytical thinking and problem solving, business knowledge, behavioral characteristics, interaction and communication, and different tools and technologies that you need to deliver your work with. So that's just very briefly there. Now I still have a question around what if only partial business analysis is applied? A quick case study about New Coke. Back in 1985, way back, New Coke Coke decided to launch a new product called New Coke. And New Coke was in fact, they did a test to see whether New Coke was better than regular Coke. So they did what we call a taste test with 200,000 different people. And the test revealed that New Coke actually tasted better than the regular Coke. So they thought, great, we're going to take this to market. So they took that to market and it failed. Nobody bought, or very few people bought New Coke. Regular Coke was still the favorite. And after careful analysis afterwards, they discovered they never considered that people actually have very strong habits that needs to be considered, and loyalty of their customers wasn't considered. So that's if they did consider all aspects of the product, New Coke, looking at their customer from all the different dimensions and angles, they would have discovered that that was not a good idea to launch this product to compete with their very popular regular Coke. So, moral of the story, with business analysis, it's almost like the cement of building a house. If you don't use cement on some of the walls that you're building, they may fall over in future. So make sure that you do follow business analysis thoroughly in your initiative. Now, quickly, the 3-step health check that I wanted to share with you. The first thing is have a look at your methodologies that you're following. And now that you know more about business analysis, just go and make sure that those different knowledge areas are applied regardless of what the methodology is that you're following. Skills and capability. As you now probably appreciate, there is quite a lot of skills that the business analyst can learn. Capability, some people are naturally good problem solvers and really good analytical thinkers, but they may need to develop some of their other competencies or other capabilities. So just maybe have a good look at your team and see how strong they are within the business analysis capability space. And then the final aspect here is about that collaboration, health of the collaboration between your different teams. So have a look at your team and how well are they really collaborating with the stakeholders around your initiative. Make sure that you've got some processes and practices in place to be able to do that collaboration effectively. If you can have these three things in place and always on continuous improvement, you will do very well with delivering your BI solutions. Now, just to say thank you very much for listening. I am very, very honored to be here today, and I really appreciate all of you spending your time listening to me and everything I have to say about business analysis. Look, it would be great if you wanted to get in touch. You can see my details here. I'm always happy to talk about business analysis and to see if there's any way that I can help you. All the best and have a great rest of your conference. Bye-bye.